6 weeks our guardsman walked the yard in the suit of shabby grey. His cricket cap was on his head, and his step seemed light and gay. But I never saw a man who looked so wistfully at the day. I never saw a man who looked with such a wistful eye upon that little tent of blue which prisoners call the sky, and at every wandering cloud that trailed its ravelled fleeces by. He did not wring his hands, as do those witless men who dare to try to rear the changeling hope in the cave of black despair. He only looked upon the sun and drank the morning air. He did not wring his hands nor weep, nor did he peak or pine, but he drank the air as though it held some healthful anodyne. With open mouth he drank the sun as though it had been wine, and I, and all the souls in pain who tramped the other ring, forgot if we ourselves had done a great or little thing, and watched with gaze of dull amaze the man who had to swing. And strange it was to see him pass with a step so light and gay, and strange it was to see him look so wistfully at the day, and strange it was to think that he had such a debt to pay. For oak and elm have pleasant leaves that in the springtime shoot, but grim to see is the gallows tree with its adder-bitten root, and green or dry a man must die before it bears its fruit. The loftiest place is that seat of grace for which all worldlings try, but who would stand in hempen band upon a scaffold high, and through a murderer's collar take his last look at the sky? It is sweet to dance to violins when love and life are fair. To dance to flutes, to dance to lutes is delicate and rare, but it is not sweet with nimble feet to dance upon the air. So with curious eyes and sick surmise we watched him day by day, and wondered if each one of us would end the selfsame way. For none can tell to what red hell his sightless soul may stray. At last the dead man walked no more amongst the trial men, and I knew that he was standing up in the black dock's dreadful pen, and that never would I see his face in God's sweet world again. Like two doomed ships that pass in storm, we had crossed each other's way, but we made no sign, we said no word, we had no word to say, for we did not meet in the holy night, but in this shameful day. A prison wall was round us both, two outcast men we were. The world had thrust us from its heart, and God from out its care, and the iron gin that waits for sin had caught us in its snare. In debtor's yard the stones are hard, and the dripping wall is high. So it was there he took the air beneath the leaden sky, and by each side a warder walked, for fear the man might die. Or else he sat with those who watched his anguish night and day, who watched him when he rose to weep, and when he crouched to pray, who watched him lest himself should rob the scaffold of its prey. The governor was strong upon the Regulations Act. The doctor said that death was but a scientific fact, and twice a day the chaplain called and left a little tract. And twice a day he smoked his pipe and drank his quart of beer. His soul was resolute and held no hiding place for fear. He often said that he was glad the hangman's hands were near. But why he said so strange a thing, no warder dared to ask. For he to whom a watcher's doom is given as his task must set a lock upon his lips and make his face a mask. Or else he might be moved and try to comfort or console. And what should human pity do pent up in murderer's hole? What word of grace in such a place could help a brother's soul? With slouch and swing around the ring we trod the fool's parade. We did not care, we knew we were the devil's own brigade, and shaven head and feet of lead make a merry masquerade. We tore the tarry rope to shreds with blunt and bleeding nails. We rubbed the doors and scrubbed the floors and cleaned the shining rails, and rank by rank we soaped the plank and clattered with the pails. We sewed the sacks, we broke the stones, we turned the dusty drill. We banged the tins and bawled the hymns and sweated on the mill. But in the heart of every man, terror was lying still. So still it lay, that every day crawled like a weed clogged wave, and we forgot the bitter lot that waits for fool and knave. Till once, as we tramped in from work, we passed an open grave. With yawning mouth, the yellow hole gaped for a living thing. The very mud cried out for blood to the thirsty asphalt ring. And we knew that ere one dawn grew fair, some prisoner had to swing. Right in we went, with soul intent on death and dread and doom. The hangman with his little bag went shuffling through the gloom, and each man trembled as he crept into his numbered tomb. That night the empty corridors were full of forms of fear, and up and down the iron town stole feet we could not hear, and through the bars that hide the stars white faces seemed to peer. He lay as one who lies and dreams in a pleasant meadowland. The watchers watched him as he slept, and could not understand how one could sleep so sweet a sleep with a hangman close at hand. But there is no sleep when men must weep who never yet have wept. So we, the fool, the fraud, the knave, that endless vigil kept, and through each brain on hands of pain another's terror crept. Alas, it is a fearful thing to feel another's guilt, for right within the sword of sin pierced to its poisoned hilt, and as molten lead were the tears we shed for the blood we had not spilled. The warders, with their shoes of felt, crept by each padlocked door, and peeped and saw with eyes of awe great figures on the floor, and wondered why men knelt to pray who never prayed before. All through the night we knelt and prayed, mad mourners, of course. The troubled plumes of midnight were the plumes upon a hearse, and bitter wine upon a sponge was the savor of remorse. The grey cock crew, the red cock crew, but never came the day, and crooked shapes of terror crouched in corners where we lay, and each evil sprite that walks by night before us seemed to play. They guided, they glided past, they glided fast, like travelers through a mist. They mocked the moon in a rigadoon of delicate turn and twist, and with formal pace and loathsome grace the phantoms kept their tryst. With mop and mow we saw them go, slim shadows hand in hand. About in ghostly rout they trod a saraband, and the damned grotesques made arabesques like the wind upon the sand. With the pirouettes, marionettes, they tripped on pointed tread, and with flutes of fear they filled the ear as their grisly mask they led, and loud they sang, and long they sang, for they sang to wake the dead. Oh ho, they cried, the world is wide, but fettered limbs go lame, and once or twice to throw the dice is a gentlemanly game, but he does not win who plays with sin in the secret house of shame. No things of air these antics were, that frolicked with such glee, to men whose lives were held in gyves, and whose feet might not go free. Ah, wounds of Christ, they were living things most terrible to see. Around they waltzed and wound, some wheeled in smirking pairs. With the mincing step of a demi-rep, some sidled up the stairs, and with subtle sneer and fawning leer each helped us at our prayers. The morning wind began to moan, and still the night went on. Through its giant loom the web of gloom crept till each thread was spun, and as we prayed, we grew afraid of the justice of the sun. The moaning wind went wandering around the weeping prison wall, till like a wheel of turning steel we felt the minutes crawl. O moaning wind, what had we done to have such a seneschal? At last I saw the shadowed bars, like a lattice wrought in lead, move right across the whitewashed wall that faced my three-plank bed, and I knew that somewhere in the world God's dreadful dawn was red. At 6 o'clock we cleaned ourselves. At 7 all was still. But the sough and swing of a mighty wing the prison seemed to fill, for the Lord of Death, with icy breath, had entered in to kill. He did not pass in purple pomp, nor ride a moon-white steed. 3 yards of cord and a sliding board are all the gallows need. So with rope of shame the herald came to do the secret deed. We were as men who through a fen of filthy darkness grope. We did not dare to breathe a prayer or to give our anguish scope. Something was dead in each of us, and what was dead was hope. For man's grim justice goes its way, and will not swerve aside. It slays the weak, it slays the strong, it has a deadly stride. With iron heel it slays the strong, the monstrous parricide. We waited for the stroke of 8. Each tongue was thick with thirst. For the stroke of 8 is the stroke of fate, and makes a man accursed. And fate will use a running noose for the best man and the worst. We had no other thing to do, save to wait for the sign to come. So like things of stone in a valley lone, quiet we sat and dumb. But each man's heart beat thick and quick, like a madman on a drum. With sudden shock the prison clock smote on the shivering ale, and from all the jail rose up a wail of impotent despair, like the sound that frightened marshes hear from some leper in his lair. And as one sees most fearful things in the crystal of a dream, we saw the greasy hempen rope hooked to the blackened beam, and heard the prayer, the hangman's snare, strangled into a scream. And all the woe that moved him so, that he gave that bitter cry, and the wild regrets and the bloody sweats, none knew so well as I. For he who lives more lives than one, more deaths than one, must die.